What's going on, everybody? LK here, and today, basically around like 1 year ago, the Ultimax 2.0 dropped finally for consoles. So if you don't know anything about this game, it is a Persona fighting game, and Persona 4 Arena actually came out in like 2012, the original one. Ultimax came out a couple years later, like 2014, 2015. But as it sometimes happens in fighting games, sometimes just versions just get lost in the sauce. We've talked about it a couple of times in this channel. Versions like, for example, the original Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator in arcades. There's a version that nobody outside of Japan ever got to play. But in a lot of these cases, another example being Melty Blood. Melty Blood Actress again has a version 1.05, the version before current code, that basically like doesn't exist. Like you can't really get it. It was arcade only. But usually these are kind of, I don't want to say in between versions, but the console versions tend to be the most recent versions, especially as we've gone on in time and everyone gets the same game at the same time. Where Persona was kind of in a unique situation because the final version of the game, so let's say like the Guilty Gear Accent Core plus R equivalent or the BBCF2 equivalent, was never released on any console for years. With all that though, we did finally actually get the final version of Persona 4 Arena last year on consoles. There's another question under that, and this is something that I could actually relate with fans of the RPG. So fans of the Persona series, they're like, where is Persona 6 news? Persona 5 came out in 2017. Persona 4 Arena fans, I don't know about y'all, but where's my Persona 5 Arena, man? I would really like a Persona 5 Arena, and since it's been so long since Persona 5 dropped, I just thought like of a couple of things I would like to see from a hypothetical Persona 5 Arena fighting game. So first would actually be about the characters. So funny enough, Ultimax kind of has a character select with Persona 5 themes, right? Since it's red and black. If you missed it, it's here for comparison. But specifically, one thing I would want is no Persona 4 or 3 characters. Specifically, at least on launch, at least for a new game. So me personally, I remember from Dragon Ball Fighters actually how angry people were with the launch roster. So here's the thing about Dragon Ball. There's like God knows how many years, maybe like 30 years of lore. So somehow narrowing that down to 22, 23 characters is pretty hard. And there was no way that everybody could be satisfied. As time went on, of course, the roster got really fleshed out, but it also makes sense for something like Dragon Ball Z, right? Like they keep like bringing back characters. There's like so much history, and this is supposed to be like, I don't want to say like everybody's here type of thing, because it's not really a story for DBFZ, but just the nature of it being a 3v3 game means it does need more characters on launch. So one problem that people have when new fighting games come out is that they never look at the fighting game as like a project over many years. So this is Ultimax. One, they already made Arena and they added characters and there were DLC characters on console. So this is like the completed product after like 3-4 years of work compared to this on launch. So I actually think on release, if it was like Persona 5 characters only, not only would it be easier to like market, let's say, but also they could put more effort into making the characters really fleshed out. Because one thing that happened in Dragon Ball Fighters is that some of these characters were not functional when the game came out, and some of the characters were way too overtuned. So smaller cast is generally better for when a new game comes out, as the devs figure out like what players are going to do with the game. Maybe in some dream timeline we get Super Persona Ultimate crossover Super Turbo with like characters from every game, but I think on launch it would be just cool if it was only Persona 5 characters. Ideally it'd be like 14 characters, so like your party and then the bosses and no pancakes, if you know what I'm saying. I guess, you know, the game's kind of old. I mean, if you know, you know, whatever. At this point too, Arc System Works are pretty good at converting characters into archetypes. You got your Narukami, Super Saiyan Goku, Grand. These guys are the main characters, and a lot of people are going to be drawn to them because they're the main character. So these characters tend to be simple all-rounders who are good at pretty much everything. They also tend to, I really want to say they make these characters good on purpose. For a really long time now, in Arc System Works games at least, whoever is the protagonist of whatever license, media, whatever, they tend to be better than pretty good. Honestly, better than pretty good. But then you have a character like Ken and Koromaru. So in the RPG they work together, and in the fighting game they work together in that the A and B buttons are Ken's normal attacks, but then the C and D buttons are attacks with Koromaru. Koromaru, come back. There you go. So if you think about it, for Persona 5, Joker, main character, all-rounder. She has the whip, she uses fire magic like Yukiko, so we could say like a zoner with big pokes, Makoto, boxing character, etc, etc. Now, one thing we would have to talk about is normal characters versus shadow characters, because in Persona 4 Ultimax, when you pick a character, you could pick the normal type, or you could pick the shadow type. In the version I competed in, which was Persona 4 Ultimax 1.1, for the most part, the shadow characters were pretty irrelevant with a couple of exceptions, like Shadow Narukami and Shadow Naoto. But in the current version of the game, shadow characters are really, really strong and some of the strongest characters in the game. So one thing I would definitely like to see out of Persona 5 Arena, hypothetically, is normal characters and shadow characters split by cast rather than all the characters. So what do I mean? So in the original Persona 4 Arena, there was only one shadow character. She's right here, Shadow Labris. When you pick her in this game, I mean, you can't pick Shadow Labris, but you can pick Shadow Labris. A little weird setup. So one thing that I think would make things a little bit more straightforward would be your party, not Shadows. The boss characters from the game are the shadow characters, and they have their unique thing. And I think that would make the characters feel more unique. Because one question I got a lot when Persona 4 Arena dropped last year again was, what is the point of playing a normal character? I heard the shadow characters are really broken. Now, it's mainly that there's some characters in this game where the shadow versions are just superior because you get access to tools faster, and when you're in shadow mode, you can't burst. But there are a couple of characters where you could use either mode and it doesn't really matter. For example, someone like Aigis. So then a couple of things about buttons. So Ultimax is an updated version of the original Persona 4 Arena, so there's stuff in this game that I wanted from the classic Persona 4 Arena, like certain characters having more Persona cards for others. Persona cards are your Persona's HP. So for example, I have Mitsuru here, here's her Persona, and if I shoot it, goodbye, she loses a Persona card. If this happens too many times, she will lose access to her Persona button. So you see the recording is trying to summon the Persona, but you can't do it. There's no Persona. And when the cards fill up, they return. So there was an issue in the original Persona 4 Arena where some characters were way more reliant on their Persona attacks than other characters. So I felt like this type of thing was already fixed. This would probably be the first thing I would look at if Ultimax didn't exist. But instead, one thing I would like to see in this hypothetical game would be one more button. So this game, Persona 4 Arena, has 4 buttons: A, B, C, and D. So the A and B buttons are physical attacks. So usually they're like kicks, punches, and maybe whatever weapon the character is known for, right? So for Yukari, all her bow attacks are on the B button. B's for bow. For Mitsuru, both her A and B button are sword attacks. Then your C and D attacks are attacks with your Persona. So for example, this is a C attack. This is her jump C. This move is really broken, by the way. This is her D attack, which sets up a mine that I can shoot with my arrow and it'll track kind of towards where the opponent is going. Where Mitsuru has simpler Persona attacks, where she has this multi-hitting whip move that you can hold C, the C button, to do more attacks. 3 versus like 15 or something like that. And then her D button are these Castlevania style whips. 2D, JD, so she has all these angles she can cover from afar. So I would like to add a 5th button that makes perfect sense for Persona 5, I think, which is the gun button. The gun button, because every character in your party has a different gun. There's a couple of reasons why I want them to add this gun button. So one, I just want the playfield to be a little bit more even. And what I mean is, in fighting games, we always meme about how like characters with guns are really broken. Like my main fighting game right now is Guilty Gear Strive. There's a character in that game named Happy Chaos. He has a gun. That shit is broken. There's no other way. I can't sugarcoat it. That shit is broken. Or one of the games I played before that, Guilty Gear Xrd, has Elphelt. She also has like 3 guns. That shit is broken too. In Persona 4 Arena, there's only 2 characters with guns. So there's Aegis, who has a lot of bullets, and she could use them for special moves, zoning in the air, things like that. Naoto, who has her little pistol that she could fire and reload over time and use it for various things. She also has a kind of shotgun submachine gun super that she does here that is really, really bad to get hit by. So 1, it would just be funny, honestly. But 2, it does make sense for the game because everyone in your party has a gun. So like Joker has a pistol, An has a submachine gun, Ryuji has a shotgun, so everyone has a gun. And I think it would actually create a pretty interesting neutral game because what it would mean for certain characters to have this extra projectile. Basically, everyone would have a at least one, the gun button. So if you go back to the characters I was looking at originally, one thing about Mitsuru, for example, is she has really, really good buttons, like lots of range. But because of her persona, she can play in ranges that zoners play in because she has this and this. So she's able to attack from way, way further. Where Yukari is more of a typical zoner where she has like, you know, her buttons are okay, but her main thing is that she's able to retreat and able to set up these traps in mid-screen. So it would open up the characters to play in different ways in different situations, which means more depth, which means more to explore, which means cool stuff. Alternatively, they don't have to add a 5th button. They can actually put these gun attacks as, I don't know, like command normals. And what I mean is in Persona 4 Arena, nobody has like a forward attack or back attack. So if I press the A button or forward A or back A, it's all the same. Same with the B button, same with the C button. There's some small exceptions with Persona attacks, but for the most part, there's no down forward plus button, that's a special attack, or forward plus button, that's a special attack. So they could do that as well if they wanted the game to stay forward buttons. Which, while we're talking about that, maybe the last thing I want to talk about is inputs. So this is actually a really spicy thing for people who are serious about fighting games. But I think if you're truly, truly serious and play many fighting games, you don't care how the developers set up the inputs of the game as long as the game is responsive. As in, there's not like a lot of delay and you can just move very quickly, which I think Persona is actually really good at. Persona actually has a lot of unique movement options. So you have like rolling, short hop, but it's not King of Fighters, unfortunately, so it's not that good. It has like kind of BlazBlue style movement, but then there's also this air turn thing that you can turn when you want, where most fighting games you only turn when you go over them. In this game, you have to do it manually. So there's actually a bunch of options I think are open as far as controls in a hypothetical new game. One would be something for beginners that if they keep the game sort of like this, makes things a little bit more streamlined. So for example, automatic air turning. There's a lot of games like, for example, BlazBlue and Exerd that have like a simple mode, usually called like stylish or something like that. And then like a classic or technical mode, which is you just control everything. And Persona is committed to having relatively easy inputs for a fighting game. So if you look here, basically everything is quarter circles, quarter circle forward, quarter circle back, and then like double quarter circles. I actually think that Dragon Ball FighterZ took inspiration from this because basically everybody has also these type of inputs in Dragon Ball. So there's no like forward, down, down, forward, no half circle, back, forward. But I don't think it would be a bad idea for having like an easy input style system, either with stylish mode, like a beginner mode, or having something like Grand Blue Fantasy where you can do special moves with one button with a penalty. But those are just some of the ideas that I had. I have so many good memories from playing Persona 4 Arena, especially the original Persona 4 Arena. Persona 4 Arena really changed anime games and started to make them like mainstream and started to get people really attracted to the games. And with Persona 5 being so popular, I think it's such an easy layup, especially since this already exists. I'm pretty surprised that we haven't really heard anything, but then also Persona 4 Arena kind of came out of nowhere too, so I don't know. If you have any ideas of your own though, definitely feel free to share them in the comment section below. Like or subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.